Tonight, the Joker decides to start his own family in a way that only the Joker would think is funny. Desaad gets really pissed off at Jack Kirby for some unknown reason. And why do they call him Bizarro when we don't even have an Azarro? But tis, all that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 105 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and it's Villains Month! Woo! I mean, boo! I guess that's the correct way to do this. Anyway, so every time that DC hits their anniversary of the beginning of the New 52, they like to pat themselves on the back and say, hey, let's stop everything we're doing and just do a little weird thing for a month. So last year, when they hit their first anniversary, they made Zero Month, where everything got a zero issue. This time, however, they decided to get real clever because Forever Evil is also starting. So they said, hey, wait a minute. We're doing a whole event based around villains. Let's do a month based around villains as well. That's genius. Thank you, Dan DiDio. So they came out with Villains Month, where every single comic stopped, got a decimal point added to the end of it, so 23.1, 2, 3, or 4, and they decided to talk about a villain that is a part of that series, kind of. You'll see where it gets a bit weird later on, but here's the part I really need you to understand. And for the video people, this is going to be a bit more impactful than the audio people, but don't worry, I'll give you an impact. They didn't publish a lot of these issues in the trades that they would make sense to go with. So like in The Dark Knight 23.1, we don't have the Poison Ivy villain issue, which is supposed to be that. Instead, if you want to get all the villains issues, you had to buy this omnibus. 1,200 pages of all of the villains issues. And for the audio people, I'm going to purposely lower the volume on this, but I hope you can still appreciate the impact. It's a bit loud. So I'm going to try to read through this, but if anybody has ever read through an omnibus, you know that the biggest problem comes from when you're reading something at the very beginning of the book or at the very end of the book, which unfortunately I have to do both in this episode. So bear with me, I am still trying to figure out how in the hell I'm supposed to read this. But that is enough about the logistics of it. Let's talk about the books that are coming out. So instead of me telling you specifically this is Action Comics 23.1, because what does that even mean? I'm going to go ahead and just tell you the villains that we're going to be covering this month. So this week, we are dealing with the villain issues for Joker, Two-Face, Ventriloquist, Poison Ivy, Cyborg Superman, Bizarro, Relic, Desaad, Grodd, Count Vertigo, Darkseid, Deadshot, and the Creeper. Additionally, the only issue for this entire month that is not a villains issue, we have the first issue of Forever Evil, the miniseries for the event that this entire thing is happening for. So we will, of course, be leading off with that. I will get to the villains afterwards, but yeah, get ready for some real problems in turning the page. Forever Evil #1, written by Geoff Johns, art by David Finch, the big universe-spanning thing that they credited as the first in the New 52, despite the fact that we just wrapped up with Trinity War, which I feel like was credited as the same thing. So going into this, all you need to know is that Trinity War happened, Pandora's box was opened, and inside of it was actually a doorway to Earth 3, which is where the crime syndicate was. And they came out and took on the Justice League. So picking up here, we deal with Lex Luthor. And he's monologuing, talking about one time I tried to save a cat. It scratched me and I threw it into the river. And we see that he's talking to a businessman named Thomas Cord. And he's basically flying in a helicopter with him and saying, hey, sell me your company. I want to do some stuff with it. And Thomas is like, no, it's my family's company and I'm going to give it to my son one day. And he's like, oh, cool. I have the ability to ruin your life and kill you and make all of your family go destitute and addicted to drugs. And that's just something I'll do for fun if you don't give me this company. And he's just like, are you serious right now? What the hell's wrong with you? He's just like, hey, accidents happen. I mean, you just might end up dead one day. That's all I'm saying. And then all of a sudden, something goes wrong with the helicopter. And they lose control. It's like a big EMP or something's going off. And they end up crashing into Lex Tower. And they're pretty much right up at the roof, so they get up, they walk over. And we see on Lex's phone and a whole bunch of computers, the words, "The world is ours," just appear over top of it. And we see that this is all the responsibility of Grid, who is the robotic half of Cyborg that split off and became his own guy. And he's like, yep, I've taken off Metropolis. It's gone off grid. Next is Gotham. So he's working on that. We see Nightwing is leaping through Gotham, and he's got Zaz back, and he's talking to Barbara and basically saying like, hey, things have been kind of weird since I moved to Chicago, and now I'm back, so how about we go sit up and talk to Bruce? And Barbara's like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. And then all of a sudden, same sort of thing happens, a big EMP. Says the world is ours. And Nightwing, he's next to Arkham Asylum, so he's like, okay, well, if something weird's going on and I'm right outside of Arkham, I better go check on what it is. And also he sees outside the door a woman in shadow that just rips the doors off the hinges. And he's like, yeah, that's something weird happening. So he storms in, but then is immediately beaten up by someone again in shadow. And he's like, huh, you look familiar. What's his name on this planet? Another voice is like, oh, they call him Nightwing here. And it's like, that's a stupid name. And so they grab him by the neck with a golden lasso and drag him away. So back to Lex. He's up on top of the LexCorp building. We see Thomas Cord is dangling off the edge of the building begging for help. And Lex is like, all right, fine, yeah, sure. Hold your horses. I'll be over in a sec. And as he does so, he sees what he thinks is Superman bust out of a building and fly into the LexCorp tower, causing Thomas to plunge to his death. And we see this Superman is X-ray visioning all over until finally he comes across a piece of kryptonite. And Lex is like, what in the hell is he doing? And we cut to Central City, where the Rogues are currently trying to get out of Iron Heights. And Captain Cold's like, oh, I think I can do it with my cold powers. And then I want to call him Heatwave, but I don't think that's right. He's like, oh, stand aside. I can do it. I can melt it with my thing. It is Heatwave. Yeah, sure. So at that point, they basically say, yeah, the Rogues stick together no matter what. We're going to go pick up Trickster because he deserves to be saved or whatever. So then we see someone that looks like the Flash goes into the building, but of course it's not the Flash. It's Johnny Quick. He busts in and he just starts ripping these guards to shreds, like atomically bad. So at that point, Captain Cold's like, I don't think that was the Flash, guys. Then we're in Belle Reve, and Amanda Waller is talking to Black Manta saying, hey, you want to join the Suicide Squad? And he's like, I only care about Aquaman, and I know your Suicide Squad thing is a scam. You don't actually ever let him go. So, no. And Amanda's like, is there anything I can offer you to say yes, maybe? He's like, the only thing I want is to kill Aquaman. And at that point, a hole opens up in the roof, and in comes Deathstorm and Power Ring, who are Firestorm and Green Lantern equivalents. And they're just like, yeah, no, we've still got dozens of prisons to free up, but we just got to take over Belle Reve real quick. So, cut back to Lex watching Ultraman, not Superman, grind up the kryptonite, heat vision it, and then snort it. And he's like, oh, God, yes, that's the good stuff. So he flies out, and he tells Grid, find every other piece of kryptonite on this planet, tell no one. And we see the message saying this world is ours keeps popping up. So back in Arkham, Scarecrow is going around to all of Batman's Rogues Gallery, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, Riddler, and Two-Face saying, hey, guys, I'm part of this secret society now, and they're gonna have this big meeting. Everyone gets these super special coins. You guys should all join. It's super cool. Batman and the Justice League, they can't stop them. We're totally invincible as long as we're with them. And everyone's just like, I don't know. Scarecrow's kind of stupid. Should we be listening to this? And Two-Face is like, I'm of two minds about it. So we go finally to Happy Harbor, which is where the Justice League's Watchtower crashed like 4 issues ago in Justice League. And everyone's gathered around as we see the crime syndicate standing on one of the platforms and just talking to like every villain saying, hey, we run the world now. It belongs to us. And everyone is looking up like, what? What's going on? They're all talking amongst each other. And we see that, it's basically just a whole bunch of tiny little conversations of the villains saying like, oh, is this a trap? Like, is the Justice League going to show up? Where the hell's Batman? I feel like Joker's somewhere in this crowd and he's going to cause his own problems. Until finally the crime syndicate starts throwing down the Justice League's like trinkets. Like the first thing that hits the ground is Aquaman's trident, and Black Manta's immediately like, this is mine. No one is taking this. This is mine now. Wonder Woman's lasso, Superman's cape, all of it shows up, and the crime syndicate just restates like, ahem, everyone, the Justice League is dead. We now run the world. So here's what's going to happen, and he introduces everybody: Owlman, Ultraman, Superwoman, Power Ring, Deathstorm, Johnny Quick, and Atomica. And he basically says, we're the crime syndicate. We destroyed our own world. We've come to this one. We're going to take it over as well. Crime now rules everything. And a guy named Monocle is out in the audience. He's like, this is stupid. That's clearly Superman. He looks just like Superman. This is a trap. They're just trapping all of us. And then Ultraman just super heat visions him to death. And he's like, anybody else want to question us? And they're like, no, we're good. So at this point, Superwoman pulls out Nightwing, who's still tied up and bound. And he's like, in order to prove that we mean business, we're going to unmask Nightwing. He is actually, and takes off the mask, Dick Grayson. And then Lex Luthor, who's watching this, is like, who the hell is Dick Grayson? So they also put up his driver's license, his social security card, and a bunch of relevant news articles regarding the death of the Flying Graysons. And it's like, oh yeah, no, he got full on doxxed. Like, Dick Grayson's identity is no more. So he's like, yeah, Grayson has many friends in the hero industry. None of them are welcome anymore. Take this as your warning. So at that point, Ultraman points out, all right, all you villains here, you can all join our secret society. Our whole thing is that we believe in strength and power. If you're weak, then you will not be able to live. So go out, be strong, do things. And we see them basically just going out throughout the world and causing problems. And at this point, the sun starts rising, and of course, Ultraman, being the opposite, is weak to the sun. So he's like, oh, geez, okay, hold on, I gotta go deal with that real quick. So he flies off in the sky, and we see him pushing the moon in front of the sun to cause a perpetual eclipse. And Lex Luthor, sitting back watching this, thinking again about, hey, I saved the cat that one time. He looks up at this perpetual eclipse and he says, this looks like a job for Superman. So where the hell is he? And that's the issue. Hell of a first issue. I'll give it that. It's a big start. Obviously, at no point yet have we actually seen how the Justice League was defeated. It happened kind of in between issues of the last issue of Justice League to now. I feel like we're going to get that backstory filled in, because otherwise it's going to feel like, how did they manage to do that? Beyond that, I mean, it does a good job of setting up this idea of this is a universe-wide event. It is a big deal, but I'm a little bit iffy because a lot of characters that they have in this crowd scene don't make any sense that they're here. For instance, Grodd, he's a problem because he's trapped in the Speed Force in terms of like current continuity. There's just a couple little things like that where it's like, this doesn't really make any sense this is happening, but I'm sure it'll get explained. Obviously, the entire point of the first month of this is all Villains Month tie-ins, where we're seeing how each of these villains either came to be or came to be working with the Secret Society. So either way, I'm intrigued. I want to see how this goes. Obviously, it's the first big event. It's a big deal. But as for this issue, I gotta say the art is not quite what I like. I don't feel like David Finch had enough time to really make it feel great. It was just a little bit off the whole way through. So I'm probably going to end up giving this one I'm going to give it a 7. It's not fantastic. It's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of setting things up. And I don't like the art that much. So I'm just going to give it a flat 7. Still good. Still, like, the writing itself is good. But I'm waiting for it to get to the point where it becomes great. So we'll see what happens down the road. Batman 23.1, aka Joker, written by Andy Kubert, art by Andy Clarke. Now, before you say anything, it's only sort of kind of a Joker origin story. It's much more focused on another character. So we pick up with a very young boy who is supposedly the Joker, and he's standing scared in his room as a hammer busts open his door, and he's holding a little gorilla doll that later on he will call Gaggy. So this hammer busts through the door, and we see this old woman who is just horrible, nasty to him. He pulls him out of the room and says, like, "Oh, you think you're funny? You think you're hiding from me after all I've done for you?" And she throws the kid down at the table and gets out a brush and some bleach, and he starts dousing the brush inside the bleach and says, like, "Oh, I'm gonna scrub you clean. I'm gonna unclog your pores." And it just seems like this horribly brutal thing, and this is apparently the kid's Aunt Eunice. So yeah, very bad. But then we cut to several years ago in the Gotham City Zoo. It looks like Joker has gotten a guy tied up with like a python, a boa constrictor, and it's about to be eaten by the snake, and all of his goons named Wedge and Nature. I don't know. It's a lot of weird names. People I'm never going to see since. And Joker's standing there, and he's just seemingly not interested in this. And it's like, "Oh, sorry, guys. I was having a flashback to my Aunt Eunice. She was such a wonderful woman. Really made me who I am today." So then he's distracted. He leaves the snake thing. The other goons are like, "Boss, it's happening. Don't you want to watch it?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." So he makes his way over to the gorilla exhibit. And he sees this little baby gorilla, and the gorilla looks up at him, and he's like, "I have an idea. I'm going to start a family." So he gasses the mother gorilla and takes the baby gorilla out of the cage. And we see him raising the baby gorilla, and he's got a high chair for it. He's feeding it food and everything, and he's asking his goons, like, "All right, come on, what do I name this thing? What do I do? This is Caesar, Attila, Caligula, Adolf. Come on, give me something big. Something I want strike fear into the names of whoever hears it." And as he's sitting there, he's like, "Finally, I got it. I understand. Oh, how did I see it before? I'll name him Jackanapes." So we see over time he dresses Jackanapes up, and we see parallels to the things that he's doing with Jackanapes, and then things that his Aunt Eunice did to him. But like with Jackanapes, it's better. Like it's nicer. Like he's being kinder to Jackanapes. As meanwhile, his Aunt Eunice is like literally punching him in the face, starving him of food, and horrible things. Where with Jackanapes, he's like proud that Jackanapes got into a fight, but he's not hitting himself, and he's literally stealing candy from children instead of starving him. So yeah, it's not a good raising, but it is still not as bad. So then we see that Jackanapes is actually highly gifted with technology. Joker puts him in front of a bomb, and Jackanapes just knows what to do. He's very good at building it. So him and Jackanapes go out, and they start attacking people. And this is a part where Joker says, like, what's up, like why he does what he does. And he basically says, you know, guilt, feeling sorry for people is a weakness. We can't afford to feel guilt. What we do is we go out and we relieve people of their guilt through whatever means necessary. And that's why we go ahead and we kill all these people. So it looks like he's having a great time with Jackanapes until finally Jackanapes becomes a fully grown gorilla, and he's so very happy to work with him officially. So apparently there is a politician who's going to shut down the Gotham Zoo. Joker takes umbrage with that. So they decide to jump off of a building onto a Zeppelin where the politician is going to be, and then attack him. They have little glider wings on their backs to guide them there. And as they get onto the ship, they start attacking everybody there. And we see as they start attacking, they throw up the bat signal, obviously, because Batman is going to come and save them. And Joker's like, Jackanapes, I bring him on, Batman. Jackanapes, I know you're ready. And Jackanapes starts crying, which I'm not sure why, but regardless, he ends up pressing this button that causes a sonic mutating device that turns all of the politicians into these horrific looking beasts. And Joker's like, haha, now they'll all fight and kill each other. But turns out he got that part wrong, and they're still focused on attacking and killing Joker. So they tackle him and Jackanapes out of the window, Joker sees the Jackanapes is unable to launch his wings so that he's able to slow his descent. And Joker's like, please, Jackanapes, open your wings. Do it, man. Don't you die on me. And so Joker lands on top of one of them, which breaks his fall. Meanwhile, Jackanapes falls over the edge of a bridge, and Joker comes over. He's like, Jackanapes, no. Oh, God, what happened? And as he looks down, he sees Jackanapes' little hat just floating in the water. And he just starts laughing. He's like, well, guess I'm going to need another one. Going to raise another gorilla. And yeah, well, that's it. That's the end of the story. I'm not sure I really like any of this. And it's not the fault of the story itself. Like, it's a fine enough written book. It just has nothing that I want to see, you know? Like, I don't want to see the Joker's backstory. Whether it's true or not, whether he's, like, just going crazy, I don't want to see that. And then with the whole Jackanapes thing, maybe it's because I don't know Jackanapes. The only time I've seen him was in flashback to Batman 666, which makes me think he was a deep pull from Grant Morrison's Mind Palace, but, like, I don't care about him either. So this entire issue is just a collection of like, okay, and I'm not interested in it. So it's not a horribly written book. I can say that. It's actually, the art's very good in this, and I like some of the stuff, the way it's phrased, but I don't care about it. It's like the same problem I have with like early Legion of Superheroes, you know? Like, I have no attachment to these characters, yet you're pretending like I should. So I'm going to give this one, I mean, I got to give it like a 6. It's still above like a 50-50. It's still above a 5, but I can't say that it's good in any meaningful regard. It's just the art's the only thing getting it as high as it is. So yeah, 6. Sorry. Batman and Robin 23.1, aka Two-Face, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Guillem March. So this is not really the origin story. I think everybody's kind of familiar with Two-Face's origin story. It's more of a, what is he doing during Forever Evil? And we see that supposedly he's just learning about this now. He's standing up on top of the bat signal, and he's flipping his coin, being like, all right, Batman's gone. Do I save Gotham, or do I let it bleed? And Scarecrow jumps in, grabs the coin before it lands. Harvey, not happy about that, aims a gun at Scarecrow and says, like, why in the hell are you taking my coin, bro? And Scarecrow's like, all right, hold on, here's the thing. As explained in the Forever Evil issue, I'm part of the secret society, and we really would like you to join. So pick a hand. And he's like, I'm going to pick whatever hand's going to give me back my coin. And so he picks a hand and ends up being the secret society's coin. And he's like, look, here's the thing. I have been given permission to make an offer with you here. I want you to join into the secret society. You will be protected. Like, you don't have to worry about anything like that. And they'll let you do as you please. And Two-Face points out, like, okay, here's the deal. I will join the secret society. I'm going to have to flip a coin first, but only on the condition that you let me self-operate here in Gotham. Like, nobody tells me what to do. It's all on the coin. Whatever the coin says is true. And Scarecrow's like, I don't see any reason why that would be a problem. Yeah, sure, go for it. So he flips the coin and says, all right, yep, he accepts the invitation. He's part of the secret society. And he says, yeah, now you tell your buddies, nothing gets in my way. Got it? And he's like, yep, nope, no problem. So then he flips the coin ahead again. He tucks away his coin, and now he's flipping the secret society coin. He flips it again, and he says, do I save Gotham or do I let it bleed? And it comes up heads, so he decides to save Gotham. And with all these villains and these criminals running around, Harvey Dent goes around and just starts shooting them all. He just starts bagging them all up. Whoever he hasn't killed, he doesn't kill any of them, but he very, very heavily wounds them by shooting them in the legs. And so he puts them all onto a bus. He goes around saving everybody, puts all the villains on a bus, and drags them to the courthouse, saying, all right, guys, come on, it's justice time. And he makes his way up to the courthouse. We see flashbacks to when he was district attorney, and he's decently well liked by everyone there. He's doing a good job, and he's putting away this criminal named McKillen. And he's like, oh, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take time to do it. And Batman's like, oh, it's never easy, Dent. So we see when he gets back into his office that there is, and I forget what their name is, but Peter Tomasi used them. It's essentially a bunch of people who were low-level criminals that had their lives ruined by Batman doing things to them. So like one of them has a batarang lodged in their head, one of which has a boot print just permanently on their face when Batman kicked them in the face. And they're just chilling here, and Harvey's like, get the hell out of my office. But they're also hanging some like lawyers and stuff, and Harvey cuts them down because, you know, they're innocent people. So at that point, Harvey says like, all right, guys, now what do you say we all head down to the main courtroom and we start dishing out real justice here? And so he goes down to the courtroom, he sits in the judge's panel, and one by one the criminals come up. He flips a coin. If it's heads, life in prison. If it's tails, he shoots them right there. And everyone's like, what? You give, like, he gets a tails on one guy and it's like, all right, or no, he gets a heads on one guy, says life in prison. And the guy's like, I stole baby formula. You're going to put me in jail for life for that? He's like, you stole baby formula for a mother with 3 kids. Yeah, you deserve it. So at that point, as he pulls up Bootface and the person with the batarang in their head and all the rest of their group, and he basically starts judging them, and he straight up shoots Bootface, and the rest of them start attacking. And Harvey's about to kill them as well, but then someone steps in who I'm not familiar with, but he's like, whoa, hold on, Two-Face. You're supposed to, you know, cause villainy and crime and whatnot across Gotham. That's part of being in the secret society. You're acting as a good guy here in fairness. That's not what we're looking for. And Two-Face is like, excuse me, Scarecrow told me that the coin would decide, and you guys were cool with that. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to keep doing that. And so he flips the coin again, and it comes up life, like one of them's allowed to live, and the guy's like, no, that's not what we want. And so he kills the guy anyway, and he's like, well, this deal is over. So he stands up and just unloads fire on everybody in the panel, including the guy who's working for the Secret Society. He takes the Secret Society coin out, puts it in the guy's mouth, says, give it to the ferryman. Then he pulls out his old coin, and he's like, well, I'm still an independent contractor here. I can be good. I can be evil. I'm not going to limit myself to one or the other. So once again, I'm going to ask the coin, do I save Gotham or do I make it bleed? And he flips the coin again. And this time it comes up tails. So bad things on the horizon. But I got to say, I like this one. I like that it doesn't take the time to go through like, and then he was hit by acid and then all this stuff. Like, we know it. We've seen the movies. We don't have to be told again Two-Face's backstory. I like how it's more playing on the idea of, okay, Two-Face is a criminal because he does bad things, but he goes by the coin. So when the morality flips, when evil then becomes the norm, he also is kind of labeled as a good guy because he's not doing inherently bad things. It's all by the coin. I like that. I like that look at it. It's a decent look. If I had any real critiques to this, it's that I just don't particularly like the way that Two-Face looks. I think that's just an art thing. It's not that he was like poorly drawn or anything. I just don't like the style they put him in. But beyond that, it's a fine enough issue. I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I think that it's a nice Two-Face issue. I wouldn't say you're able to read it on its own, considering it's so heavily tied into what Forever Evil is as an event. But it is just a good delving into, like, no, Two-Face is not inherently evil. He's neutral. And I want to say chaotic, but that goes against the fairness aspect. So I guess he's lawful neutral, despite the fact that that's not what he is. It's true neutral. That's what it is, if I'm being honest. But no, that's a solid 7.5. Batman the Dark Knight 23.1, aka Ventriloquist, written by Gail, Simone, art by Derlis, Santacruz. So, Batgirl is the book where Ventriloquist, or at least this version of Ventriloquist, originally showed up. So, just know that that was a thing. We've already dealt with this story arc. It's already been wrapped up, but now Ventriloquist is out again. So we pick up in the middle of Forever Evil. Gotham City has gone dark, but there is a single building that still has power somehow. And we see a whole bunch of people are all gathering at it, and they're like, oh, this theater, this random theater has some power. We need to go inside. The sign outside says they even have food and drink and shelter from all of this horrible crap going on out in Gotham. And inside we see, giving an interview, is the ventriloquist and her dummy. I know there's an actual word for it, a more professional term, but the dummy named Ferdy. And they're giving an interview to this interviewer, this reporter, but turns out this reporter has been strung up and hung by a microphone, and she has been painted as a dummy herself. So the ventriloquist's name is Shauna, by the way. So Sean and Ferdy look at the ventriloquist, and it's like, oh yeah, no, she's not really asking too many questions, is she? Seems kind of shy. So this entire time, Ferdy's making just like stupid little crass jokes. I just want to make that clear. A lot of them are actually pretty funnily written, but it's just weird because the whole thing is played in a very dark tone. So anyway, outside we see these people start making their way in, and they start talking to each other saying like, yeah, no, it's crazy out there. I saw a man literally get torn to pieces. Like, I am totally cool with staying in here no matter what it means. And everyone starts to introduce themselves and say like, oh yeah, here's the reason you should feel bad when I am inevitably going to die. So we start getting flashbacks to Shauna literally at the moment of her birth. She was a twin. She had a twin brother. And as the babies are born, she's like, oh yeah, I was born into a two-man act. But from a young age, my brother was, well, the way the ventriloquist phrases it, it's that nobody thinks the brother is better than her, that she's the star of the show. But we see through the visuals that everyone thinks the brother is just fantastic, to the point where it's like, oh, I just have to tell you, your son is so perfect and beautiful. He's an amazing little child. And then the mother's like, what about my daughter? And there's like, who? What? What are you talking about? So we see some of the people inside. They see these like home-cooked meals and whatnot. They see these turkeys and breadsticks and whatnot. And it's like, oh my God, this is a cornucopia. Thank God. Let's dig in. Let's eat. So they start eating the food. We see basically the brother is told, like, you're going to be a star. You're so perfect and attractive looking. Like, no matter, like, we're going to turn you into something that's going to be famous. And meanwhile, Shauna is made fun of she's called Shabby Shauna, which is a bit weak. I don't think that's the best insult these kids could have come up with. But regardless, one day she discovers she has this power. She has a telekinetic ability. She pushes one of the kids out into the middle of the road, and she is hit by a car. And Shauna's just like, yeah, well, serves you right. So at this point, we see that the brother gets a record deal, and like, kids, all these little girls are going to be screaming his name as he's up there performing. And they're on the swings in this like concrete playground. And he's like, are you sure you're not jealous? Are you sure you're cool? And she's like, why would I be jealous? You're my brother. I'm happy for you. Just be careful on the swing set. Concrete will break your neck. And then she uses her powers to start swinging the swing much higher than he's comfortable with, until finally, because it is a rundown playground, as he's screaming out that he'll quit, he promises, he doesn't even want to be famous. She's like, oh, I don't believe you. Everybody wants to be famous. Swing snaps. He breaks his neck, and Shauna's the only one left. So at this point, we see there is a gang member named Max, and he's being told by some fellow gang members, hey, this theater down the street's got power. We saw some people going in there, including some hot young women, hunka hunka. So at that point, he says, all right, gather up the boys. We'll make our way in. So everyone's queuing up for the show. They're like, hey, look, if I got to sit through a show to enjoy this meal and take shelter, I'll sit through whatever. There's no reason not to. So everyone's sitting down, getting ready for that. We see Shauna is becoming more and more of there's no better word to say it. She's being a bitch. And finally, it goes to the part that we actually saw in the Batgirl book, where she arrives at a birthday party for someone in her class. They didn't want to invite her. And she meets up with a clown magician who has this young little dummy, this tiny little dummy that he's using. And Shauna wants the dummy and decides to take it. And turns out she names the dummy after her brother. The brother's name was Ferdy. So now the dummy's name is Ferdy because, of course, it just has to all come back like that. So at that point, they explained, yeah, then the Batgirl story happened when she got older, and she managed to escape from that by using her powers to pull the guns on some police officers, or pull the triggers on some police officers' guns, and freeing herself. So anyway, we finally get to the point where she announces herself on stage, she comes out, and she starts doing a show, and just because she looks so gaunt, and Ferdy is so... he's throwing out all these crass jokes, and he's also unsettling looking. Everyone in the audience is like, dear God, we need to get out of here. This, no matter what, like, this is not okay. We need to bail. But everyone's like too scared to move because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they do. Outside, we see the gang members are busting their way into the theater. They actually ram down the doors. And Ferdy's like, oh, hey, I hear somebody coming in. They couldn't wait for the second showing. Come on, Toots, let's go take care of them. So they go off stage as the gang members come in and start attacking the audience. And then we see Ferdy laying on the ground, and Shauna just uses her abilities to use Ferdy to attack all of these people. And like he has little drills in his hands. He drills into the eyes of the main gang member. Everyone else just starts running away in different directions, and Ferdy just chases them down straight up like out of a horror movie, where you just never know where he's going to be. At one point, one of the gang members makes it to Ferdy's dressing room, where he has a whole bunch of letters written to Batgirl saying, hey, Batgirl, I think you're so hot. Please don't let Shauna find out, though, because she's so crazy. And Ferdy's like, well, can't let you go with seeing that. So he kills that guy. And finally, yeah, everyone's dead. And Ferdy comes back to Shauna and he's just like, well, I took care of everyone that was a problem. By the way, Shauna, you're actually a really cool person. Like, with all this evil stuff going on outside, you opened up this theater and you brought these people a place to stay. That's really cool of you. You're a good person. And Shauna's like, oh, well, I guess I should mention, I didn't really care for them if they were living or dead. I just wanted an audience, so I poisoned the food before they ate it. And we see her still putting on her act with Ferdy as the entire audience has been turned into puppets that she is just performing for, including Jasper the cat. There was a cat owned by a woman named Jasper, and he's now dead, which, frankly, she's now a supervillain in my book. How dare she? So, yeah, I mean, it's creepy. I'll give it that. I think it's very well done in a creepy regard. I don't understand why we did this bit of she is going after these gang members that were also evil. It kind of makes it feel like we're trying to make her more neutral than evil, but no, she's definitely evil. So like everything in the backstory was even just throwing out there that she's evil. So I don't know, that part kind of felt like a misstep, but everything else I thought was great. I think it did a great job of appealing to, you know, oh, these are real people and they each are just trying to survive this thing, and then Shauna shows up and just makes it so much worse. So yeah, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. It doesn't quite crack the 8 territory for me, but it's close. It's very close to that, but there's just something holding it back where it doesn't feel like it's quite an 8. So 7.5. Detective Comics 23.1, aka Poison Ivy, written by Derek Fridolfs, art by Javier Pina. So we open up in the middle of Forever Evil stuff, like the whole city of Gotham's on fire, more or less. And we open with a quote that I actually like. Civilization is the occasional, but always temporary, interruption of the jungle. I like that. So we see all these people, like, you know, committing crimes, looting, stuff like that, and Poison Ivy starts marking her way down the street, and she's like, well, Gotham has always had its protectors, it's always had peaceful, it's had Batman. Now there isn't, so it's falling apart, and you know what, I'm cool with that. So as she walks down the street, she like sees these people looting, and she puts her hands on their cheek, and they just immediately drop dead. We see some people approaching her with like bats and weapons, and she just turns them on each other. And then finally she reaches a woman who is trying to outrun this man who is apparently an abusive husband, and saying, where's my daughter? You know, I deserve to see her. I'm the one who's her dad. You gotta let me see her. And we see that the daughter is hiding behind a bush. And it cuts to a flashback sequence for Pamela Isley. And I want to say real quick, the entire flashback sequence is done in watercolors, and they make it look like it is on canvas instead of paper. I love this look. This is a fantastic way to not only get the innocence of the youth, while also clearly delineating that it's a flashback. Just fantastically done. So we see that she's a very young child here, probably like 6 or 7. Her parents are fighting inside the house. Turns out she has some sort of disease where she can't be out in the sun for very long, so she's forced to wear like lotion and wear a wide-brimmed hat. And her father's the one who's paying for all of this stuff, but her mom is the one who's saying, no, she needs to get out there. She needs to enjoy the world, whereas dad is keeping her locked up. And the dad ends up beating the mom, ends up punching her. So the mom heads out into the garden, starts gardening, and she has a black eye at this point. And Pamela's like, Mom, your face. And it's just like, oh, it's okay, honey. Sometimes parents disagree. It's not for you to worry about. And we see that the dad always comes back to the mom after he does something like this with a bunch of flowers to go in the garden. So as he abuses her more and more and more, the garden grows more and more and more. And that's where Pamela learned that the flowers could be used to manipulate others. So we see the abusive husband about to attack the wife, and all of a sudden he's strung up by a bunch of vines. And Poison Ivy's like, hey, you can watch him die slowly, or you can speed it along, but be careful if you try to free him, because it might kill you too. Okay, bye. So then she makes her way down to the Gotham Botanical Garden, and it turns out a bunch of hoodlums are setting it on fire. They are throwing Molotov cocktails and they are lighting the whole thing on fire. And as she watches them dance around on the ashes, she flashes back to her father getting arrested because of the fact that he basically went too far one day and he ended up killing her mother, and he buried her out in the garden that she took so long to build. So that's where she learned that she could never lose control of herself. So we see Poison Ivy coming up to the guy setting fire to the garden. She's like, no, I get it. You like destroying weaker things. You like killing smaller things because they can't fight back. That's how I feel about you, as she drags them under the ground and says, the garden will come back. You all are about to die forever. So as she makes her way down to the Gotham Park, she shows that back in college, she came up with this pheromone pill, and she tested it out on some local kids as basically a drug dealer, and she was arrested for it, but turns out that one of the first people that she got on the pill was her dean, and so the dean was able to basically get the charges all dismissed, and she was able to graduate with honors, more or less. So as she's walking through the park, she's attacked by a gang. Gang's like, this is our turf, you need to get to stepping. And she just immediately whips the guns out of their hands, attacks them with some huge spiky thorns, and then summons these big green monster looking things saying, hey, tell the rest of your gang, this is my turf now. It listens to me. So we see 2 cops that are trying to deal with everything going on in Gotham, and as they're driving in a car, it almost hits Pam, and then she flashes back again to when she visits her dad in jail. It's the first time she's seen him since then, and she just sits in silence staring at him for a while until finally she makes the first move, lunges over the table, and gives him a big kiss on the lips. And immediately the guards are like, what the hell? Get her out of here. What is she doing? And turns out that later that night, he died of a heart attack. And by the time the coroner had time to do an autopsy, the poison on her lips had already dissipated. So she then goes up to the cops that almost hit her. They swerved out of the way. And she basically goes up to the cops and say, hey, your department didn't save my mom. You failed her. You failed me. So I'm going to show you the same thing that I showed my dad. And she gives them both a kiss, and they die in seconds. So at this point, she makes her way over to Wayne Tower, and she sicks all of her green monsters on the people trying to stop her as she makes her way higher up. And we see that after college, she made her way. She got into Wayne Enterprises, specifically their chemical R&D department, and she tried to basically pitch to Bruce Wayne, hey, pheromones. We can basically use it to target people individually for products. It will make it so that our marketing department is not even necessary, and we can use this for like military applications as well. And Bruce is like, I hear you. I get it. That sounds nightmarish. You have to give people the choice. Like, you can't just rob them of that. I'm not letting you do this. And she's like, well, fine. I'll take it around. I'll shop it elsewhere. And he's like, no, your contract says that everything you develop in Wayne Enterprises belongs to Wayne Enterprises. The reason I want you to make this clear to you. The reason I am stopping this is not out of some personal vendetta against you. Like, you seem like a decent enough person. It's because what you're saying is mind control and brainwashing. And that's not cool. It's against ethical standards. And so she storms out, goes back down to the lab. She tries stealing all of her work back so that she is able to pitch it somewhere else. But security grabs hold of her and a bunch of chemicals land on her. So at that point, we see in Wayne Enterprises, she's loading up a whole bunch of bags of what I can only assume is fertilizer. As she says, once those chemicals spilled on me, I got a connection to the green, and I heard the plants, they talked to me. I had they called me an eco-terrorist. I even had some people in my side for a while. I worked with the birds of prey. Remember that? That happened like 2 years ago, but now I'm on my own. And she stands across the street from Wayne Enterprises, and she just explodes it. The whole building just explodes. And she watches on and she's like, I have a vision for what this city can be without Batman, with only the jungle taking over. And we see the zoomed out shot of the city. She's like, half the city is covered in leaves and grass and foliage. And as she's standing on top of the building, turns out it's GCPD. Gordon comes up. He's got his gun trained on her, and she just leaps off the edge of the building and says, without Batman, without any obstacles to get in my way, the Green Kingdom will flourish. So it sounds like she's about to take over the entirety of Gotham, more or less. So I'm curious to see if this is going to tie in with a Forever Evil spin-off series. I think there's one that's specifically focused on Gotham, if I'm remembering correctly. It's like Arkham something. I don't know. Regardless, I'm interested to see where it goes, how much Poison Ivy is really going to be making a push here. Obviously, this is not anti-hero Poison Ivy. This is much more of villain, so we'll see where that slow transition takes place, if ever. But I'm going to give this one I'll give it an 8. I think it's very well written. I think the art looks great, and I really got to give credit for those flashback sequences because they are just beautiful looking. The watercolor is just fantastic. So you know what? I'm actually going to go even higher. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I really enjoyed this issue. It was a very good issue. Action Comics 23.1, aka Cyborg Superman, written by Michael Allen Nelson, art by Mike Hawthorne. So this is coming from Supergirl. This is where Cyborg Superman's thing is happening, and I mean, they spoiled who it was at the end of the last issue of Supergirl, but I'll save it for at least 3 pages here. We open up with the destroyed city of Argo 9 months after Krypton was destroyed, and we see Brainiac is basically just picking through it, and he's like, yep, nope, whole lot of people are dead. Is anybody here alive? And one of the drones is like, yeah, there's like a couple here, but they'll be dead super soon. But one of them, the guy over there, he's actually like conscious. And Brainiac's like, oh, hey, he's the one who like used my tech, who like called me here. I'm gonna go help him. So we cut back to 1 month before Krypton's destruction, and we see Jor-El and his brother Zor-El. And spoiler, Zor-El is Cyborg Superman, like obviously. So they both know that Krypton is going to be destroyed, but they have different ways of going about it. Jor-El is saying, like, I found a planet called Earth, and they look just like us, so we can send our children there, and they'll grow up, and they will, like, basically blend right in. It's perfect. And Zor-El's like, okay, Earth is like a mud planet of stupid monkeys, so, like, that's a bad idea. I have a different idea, and what I'm thinking is that we use the Brainiac tech for when he shrunk Kandor, we reverse engineer it, and we just shrink a city and save everyone inside. That sounds like a good plan to me. And Jor-El's like, dude, if you're ever talking about using Brainiac tech, it's a bad idea, just straight up off the bat. And Zor-El's like, don't you tell me it's a bad idea. We're both scientists. I'm your older brother. You know, give me some respect, man. And he's like, look, no, I get it, but like, put your ego aside for a minute. This is about our children. This is like, we need to figure out how to save them. And he's just like, oh, whatever. You know what? You're sending your kid to a monkey planet. I'm at least going to save my daughter to something worth saving. So we then see Brainiac taking the body of Zor-El, and he's basically like, yeah, this guy's the brother of Jor-El, and Jor-El's one I actually respected. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take out a bunch of the bits of his body, including the parts of his brain that have like memories and critical thinking, and we're just going to yank those out and make him look more like Jor-El, because that's the part I'm really interested in. And he says that what remains after it's done will be perfection. And we see he has made the cyborg Superman. And Brainiac's like, hey, you're the cyborg Superman. He doesn't actually call him that. You're the ultimate Kryptonian. You are perfection. And your task is to go out, search the universe for other specimens worthy of being turned perfect, and bring them to me, and I will make them perfect. Okay? That's your goal. That's what you do. So we go back to Krypton. We see that Allura, Zor-El's wife, is like, oh, honey, what are you doing? Why are you still up? Let's go to bed. And he's like, nah, I got to get this done. It's really important I get it done before tonight. And he's like, okay, well, what is it? It's like, it's a energy cell thing I need to work on. It's like, that doesn't sound like it's super important. He's like, well, it is, honey. I'll be in a while. And she's just like, okay, look, is this like a Jor-El thing? Like, isn't Jor-El working on like a similar project to whatever you're doing? And it's like, just because he gets the recognition, that doesn't make him a better scientist, honey. I hope you understand that. So at that point, Zor-El's like, you're right. Yeah, sorry. I am just going to finish this real quick, though. So we go to a planet called Campara, and I'm just going to get all the Campara stuff out of the way now because it's just not a lot of substance, but it's there. He comes down to the planet. He's unable to understand any of the aliens that speak there. So he takes these tendrils and drills into their brains and learns their language. And he's like, great, perfect. Do any of you want to be perfect? And everyone's like, oh, God, he's killed these people. And he's like, okay, well, all of you are weak and scared and pathetic. Tell me where your perfect people are. And one of them points up in the sky to this castle that's floating up there. And he makes his way up there, and that's where all the rich people are hanging out. And he's like, hey, any of you want to be perfect? And one of them steps up and he's like, psh, I'm already perfect. I am the elite Camparan. And he's just like, okay, so do you want to be perfect or not? And so the guy taunts him, says like, oh, why don't you come here, fight me mano a mano. And so Cyborg Superman just comes up, grabs him by the throat, and is just like, okay, so here's the deal. I need to know that you are ruthless enough to become perfect, so either you get to live or everyone that you love on your little floating castle thing gets to live. Which is it? And the guy says, oh, please don't kill me. He's like, that's a positive enough answer. So he kills all of this guy's family. And then Cyborg Superman's like, now, do you want to become perfect? He's like, oh, God, you killed my family. I can't believe it. I'm begging you, please. And he's like, perfect things don't beg. So he drops the guy to the ground. And then he comes across the military of Campara, which is basically just like, okay, open fire, take this guy out. And he's just like, I don't want to deal with this, but possibly one of you is going to be like high enough up the chain. So he goes up, he manages to find the general, and he's like, General, do you want to be perfect? And he's like, I don't like you. I don't like whatever it is you're offering, but I know I am strong enough to take you on. He's like, no, you aren't. And he's like, yes, I am, because I'm willing to die for it. And he says, now. And then all of the ships around them just self-sabotage and destroy the ship that Cyborg Superman is on in an effort to take him out. And so Cyborg Superman's like, self-sabotage, that's not perfect. So going back into the story real quick, we see Zor-El is still working on whatever machine he's trying to do. He's trying to reenact the Brainiac stuff. Kara comes up and is like, hey, Dad, what are you doing? He's like, hey, don't leave town because I might need you very quickly to do something for me. And she's like, okay, you're kind of acting weird, Dad. And he's like, right, it's complicated. Just trust me on this. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going off to do things with my friends. Bye. And she's like, right, but stay close. So at this point, we then see it's moments before the destruction of Krypton, and Zor-El caved. He sent Kara off in a rocket because he wasn't completely confident in his own abilities. And Allura's like, is your project going to work? And he's like, yeah, no, totally. We're totally going to be safe. And he's like, if you believed that, you wouldn't have sent our daughter away. And he's like, I had to be careful with her. I'm sorry. I know I should have been a better husband. And as she's drinking, she's like, yeah, I wish you were a better scientist, like your brother. And he's just like, oh, oh, God, why do you got to do that to me? So at that point, we see he's 2 days after the destruction of Krypton. The city of Argo is still alive, but it's not thriving. There is a problem. Like, they cannot continue to live like this for long. So he's already building like a beacon, a distress signal, and he's basically trying to signal Brainiac, like, hey, get us out of here, help us. And so as people in the city start dropping dead, he's just working on this, saying he's got to come, he's got to be here. I know he's going to save us. And in the end, yeah, we see what we saw at the end, where there was no one left. Everyone else was dead. Zor-El was the only quote-unquote survivor. But the last thing we see in terms of the Kampara story is that Cyborg Superman flies over a pair of brothers who are looking for food, scavenging for it. And he's like, hey, what are you willing to do to survive? And they say, I don't know, whatever. And so he drops down a metal bar and says, fight to the death. And so they do. And one of the brothers kills the other one. And he's like, are you going to give me food now? And he's like, yes, I will. And so he heat visions his brother's body and says, there, eat of his flesh and you will become stronger. And the brother just runs away because obviously that's totally messed up. And Cyborg Superman's like, weak. All of them weak. I need perfection. So, yeah, that's the book. I enjoyed it. I think it's a solid look into how flawed of a character, even when he had his memory wiped, there's still this idea of how flawed of a scientist, how like insecure he was in his own abilities, Zor-El was. And then when he becomes Cyborg Superman and he's told you're now this perfect being, he takes that and he starts preying on the insecurities of others. He starts really laying it down, saying, oh, all of you are weak the same way that I was. And even if he doesn't remember it, it seems like it's a subconscious thing. So, yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I think it's a solidly written book. Overall, I would say my only issue is that Cyborg Superman's kind of a one note in terms of all he says is like, yes, you're weak. Like, I want him to talk more. I want to know more about his character. But I get enough of that in Supergirl. So I'll go ahead and say this one is a solid 8. I really do enjoy it. I think it's a nice in-depth look of at least Zor-El, if not Cyborg Superman. And, yeah, I like it. Superman 23.1, aka Bizarro, written by Sholly Fisch, art by Geoff Johnson. So we've never actually seen Bizarro in the New 52 universe, so this is a definite origin story and also a death story. So we open up with two different like timeline things going on. As we come to understand it, there are red parts, which are what are things that have happened or are going to happen, and then there are blue parts, which is Lex Luthor's just imagination of, boy, I wish things were like this. And we just see a whole bunch of stuff that we don't understand yet. And he says, yes, this is a ending with a beginning and a beginning of an end. And we see way back in Grant Morrison's Action Comics where young Superman in his t-shirt and jeans comes in, takes Lex Luthor hostage for a minute and tells him, where's my cape? Give me back my cape. And because he is not quite as invulnerable as he was and he's been tortured, he left some blood on Lex Luthor's jacket, and he's like, that's it. That's all I needed. Now I'm going to use this blood, and I'm going to create myself my own personal Superman, because the army is so convinced that we need like Iron Man stuff. We need those suits of armor. No, screw that. I am going to take Superman and all of his strength and all of his power, and I'm going to make one of my own that is loyal to me and me alone. We make it from whole cloth, not add it to a normal thing. So we see, his plan for that. We see a Superman made by Lex Luthor who will obey him and everything he wants. So they use the blood, they map his genome, and they basically say, okay, it's been 2 years of development. We finally have got this. We've got a guy here, and he is, a little bit sickly. He's a little bit, small. We're going to use him, and we are going to take the Kryptonian genome, and we're going to bind it to his DNA. And that should be enough to make it work. And we see this kid, he's wearing a Superman t-shirt as Lex is explaining all this. And Lex is like, what you wearing there, kid? He's like, oh, Superman. I thought it made sense because I'm about to get all big and strong, right? And Lex is like, yeah, great. So we see that this vial that he has prepared is the A0 vial. This is his first test of the A0 thing. And so he injects the kid with it, and he explains like, yeah, it's like technically a virus, but it's got nanobots in it, and don't worry about it. It'll all be fine. So he injects the guy, and asks him how he feels. And he's like, all right, well, it should take possibly a few weeks for you to feel the effects, but we're just going to pump that up a little bit. And he turns on a yellow sun generating like ray, and he turns it off. He's like, all right, so now within the next 24 or 48 hours. But then he looks at him, and he's immediately just buff and huge. And he's like, okay, that's faster than anticipated, which, because it's not anticipated, is bad news. And we see this guy starts collapsing in pain. He starts growing, his skin turns white, and he essentially becomes completely like uncontrollable. He's just in a rage. And Lex is told like, oh, good Lord, we have to get out of here. And Lex is like, oh, don't worry about it. He's loyal to me. He'll always listen to what I say. And he says, stop where you are, Bobby. His name is Bobby. And Bobby just slams the ground and sends Lex flying. He's like, okay, new theory. His brain is swelling, and therefore he's not able to actually think at all. So I'm going to go ahead and have to pull out the kryptonite on this one. So he slams shut a door enough to give him some time. We see Bobby is still rapidly growing. He is basically getting larger and larger with every passing second. And Superman pulls out a kryptonite ray, shoots him, and he's like, you got Kryptonian DNA. This is going to hurt. And he hits him with the ray, and it does nothing because the human side, I guess, canceled it out. So Lex goes running. He's like, all right, well, that's why we've got a plan C. And he pulls out these bunch of different security protocols, plasma drones, Lex bots, quantum hounds. He sends them all after Bobby, and Bobby's just like tearing them apart. He's like just way too powerful for these guys. And Lex is like, okay, well, let's think this through. What's the way that we should be able to counter this? And he looks at the powers that Bobby's using, and he's like, wait a minute, this is all wrong. He's got cold vision and heat breath. That's not what Superman's got. Oh man, I really messed this one up. So as he thinks through it and he realizes that Bobby continues to grow more and more and more, he's like, I've got an idea. All right, so he taunts Bobby, sends him running back into the lab, back into the same spot he was, and Lex flips on the yellow sun again, and Bobby starts growing even more rapidly to the point where his human cells are becoming strained, and there's no way for him to stay together. So we see him become just this goopy blob that explodes all over the lab, and Lex is like the only one left alive in here, and he looks around, he's like, all right, well, you know what? In science, there's no such thing as a complete failure. You can always learn from your mistakes. So he scoops up a sample of Bobby, and he starts doing tests underneath it. And he's like, yeah, okay. So seems like being able to bind this with an already existing human is just not going to work. Like, there's no way that's going to work. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to start from scratch, and I'm going to have to grow myself to Kryptonian. Even with advanced aging stuff, it's going to take years to get there, but it's well worth it because I can grow a whole bunch of them all at once and get myself an army of Supermen ready in just a few years. So, yep, we'll go ahead and get started. Scrap the A0 line. Now we're on to the B0 line. Bizarro. It's Bizarro. We're going on to Bizarro. Turns out this story had nothing to do with Bizarro at all. That was Bobby. Bizarro is his own guy who will be made in some years' time. But considering this was set 3 years ago, I think, we're going to get him. He's going to show up. Point being, I like this issue. I think it's smart. It's one of those like sneaky little cheeky things where they're like, yeah, he's named Bizarro, but like we changed it so that Bizarro actually comes from B0. And I know that it's retconning and I know that it's just a cheeky little joke, but like I love stuff like that. I love people who are presented with a name or something that already exists and they have to explain it and how it fits into this other thing. I love that level of retconning. So in all, this story is fine. Obviously, it's just kind of talking about Bizarro, despite the fact that this isn't Bizarro. We see powers that he will have, despite the fact we don't have him yet. It's a good little one and done story. I don't have any problems with it. It's not great by any means. I just like the little retcon there at the end. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I really liked it. I think it's good. My only real critique is the art style, Geoff Johnson's art style. It's good. It's fine. but with the cover that this one has, it severely underdelivers because it's very flat and a little bit too cartoony. So yeah, the cover lies, but covers always lie, so I'll still give it that 7.5. Green Lantern 23.1, aka Relic, written by Robert Venditti, art by Rags Morales. So, this one's actually kind of strange because the entire book is told in full-page spreads. And I just wanted to let that known because it definitely speeds up the pace of the book, but it also makes it feel bigger in a way. I don't, more epic in scale, I guess. I don't know how best to describe it. But regardless, this is the story of Relic. We open up in a different universe, the universe before ours. And it said there were these light. There was this light, this beautiful cosmic light, and you'd think that it was like a dance of cosmic entities, but in actuality, it was a war. There was war between the different lightsmiths. And we see that after this war, all these people were dead, all these people fought, and there was one named Relic. And he wasn't a lightsmith, and he tried to warn all the lightsmiths, hey, stop what you're doing, this isn't worth it. And they sometimes fought against each other, sometimes they had a common enemy, but regardless, Relic tried to warn them the fuel of existence was being depleted. And we get the explanation that in the universe before ours, there's the same emotional spectrum. They have the same colors and the same everything else. They didn't all use rings. In fact, it looks like they stuck to like staffs mostly. But regardless, Relic reasoned that these things, these lights that they're using, they are a resource. And there's no such thing as free energy in the universe. So they have to be drawing from something. Even if they don't know what they're drawing from, they have to be drawing from something, and that something can be depleted. But regardless, we see that they have different names for each of the lights. The red of fury, orange of gluttony, the yellow of terror, green of resolve, blue of faith, indigo of empathy, and violet of passion. And they use lights for literally goddamn everything. From buildings to cars to subways, all of it is made out of lights. And again, Relic puts out there, he calls in all of the different light smiths. He says to all of them, hey, guys, just hear me out. This is my theory. And everyone's just like, you stupid idiot. You just sound like a Luddite. You sound like someone who wants us to go back to the Dark Ages, quite literally, because you want us to stop using light. Ain't gonna work, buddy. We're living large, and if you can find this reservoir, if you can find this thing that we're drawing from, maybe then we will believe you. But as it stands now, piss off. So he decides, well, okay, yeah, sure. And by the way, they call him a relic because, he wants to go back to olden times. Get it? So he says, all right, you know what, fine. You want me to find the reservoir? I'm going to go find the reservoir. I'm going to make a ship. I'm going to go find the reservoir. So he uses all these technology things that he can find, and he goes looking for the reservoir. And what he ends up finding at the edge of the universe is the source wall, or at least some version of it in this previous universe. And he sees that everything that he attaches to it to try to, or anything he touches it with to try to inspect it, becomes part of the source wall itself. So there's no way to really start looking at it. So he's like, okay, well, that's weird. But regardless, before he can even find any evidence of the reservoir, the Blue Lantern Corps, the Blue, whatever they're called, people, their central power battery, or their version of it, starts going out. It starts dimming. And all the lightsmiths call this event the dimming, until finally it goes completely out. The converter has gone dark. And so there is no more hope left, or faith, I think there is. So there's no more faith. And with that, Relic starts seeming like he is being correct. So all of the lightsmiths now at this point, they start trying to fight each other for their energy. They try to get everything all coalesced into one and trying to figure out who should be the one to have it all. But in fighting, they keep on using more and more of their energy. And we see that one by one, each of the different cores go out. Every single one of them, including the green core, goes out. And in the very end, when the last one of them goes to die, Relic holds him and just be like, you should have listened to me. You all should have listened. I should have made you listen. And as the last lights go out, turns out that when he says this was the fuel for the universe, he meant it, and that all of the universe starts to just collapse in on itself. Everything just goes out all at once. And as everything starts going to pieces, he makes his way back out to the source wall, which now is crumbling, and it starts having holes inside of it. So he's like, well, I'm going to die no matter what. Might as well see what's on the other side of this wall. So he goes through a hole in the source wall, and as he comes out on the other side, and it feels like an eternity as he's going through, but as he comes out on the other side, he realizes there's another universe here. And we literally see the blue hand of creation at the beginning, and he's here, and he's like, wait a minute, hold on, what? How is this? How can I? What? And as he's there, he starts coalescing. A bubble forms around him because it is the universe rejecting him, more or less. He's something that shouldn't be there in its infancy, but he's still conscious. He is still seeing things that are outside of it. And over the eons, eventually, Kyle Rayner and the Guardians arrive, and he's like, wait a minute, hold on. You guys are using light. I don't approve. So he busts out of his bubble. He goes to attack them, and he says, I am going to make you listen this time. I refuse to let another universe die. And that's Relic's origin. So here's the thing. In the Green Lantern New Guardians book, this is all pretty much mapped out already. It feels like this is just kind of a recap with a bunch more pretty images. I do appreciate us getting more into the backstory of what the previous universe actually looked like. I actually think it's a pretty cool concept to say, like, no, there are things, there are constants across not only like parallel Earths and stuff like that, like there's always a Green Lantern there, but even in a prior universe, there were Lantern Corps. Even if they didn't get called that, there were people who worked with the emotional spectrum. And I like that. I think it's an interesting concept here. That being said, Relic as a villain, I don't dislike him, but he feels far too dispassionate, I guess. That's the wrong word, but it's the closest I can get. In that his entire thing is that he wasn't pushy enough. He didn't tell them, like, hey, you gotta listen to me. And I guess it's the same sort of thing of, like, every scientist in DC Comics, where it's like, hey, everybody, listen up. And they're all just like, pshaw. I mean, that's most scientists in the real world, too. But regardless, I think that turning him into a villain now and saying he's the bad guy, like, is he? Like, I just don't feel like he's quite villainous, really. I feel like he's more so a neutral character that can be reasoned with, but who knows, maybe he is a bit more hard than that. I just didn't get that from this comic, but we'll see what happens when we pick up in Green Lantern soon enough. Overall, I'm going to say this issue, art is great, it looks fantastic. I do think there are a few pages that are a bit weird, but it definitely felt like it was an epic scaled issue, even if it went by very quickly. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. It doesn't quite feel like it gets the 8 on that, but it is still very good. I think that it does a good job of at least selling this idea of the previous universe, even if it doesn't quite sell me on Relic. Earth 2, number 15.1, aka Desaad, written by Paul Levitz, art by Yildiray Cinar. So, I gotta admit, I'm only like 50% sure I know what happened in this issue. So we pick up 5 years ago, which is of course around about the time that the first fight against Darkseid happened, and we see that Desaad is coming up on a beach, and he is in the ocean, and he comes up against a shark, and he's like, pshaw, this shark is pathetic. It is unable to conceive of its own pain. I don't need it. So he just throws the shark up on the beach, and he comes across this guy who's drunk asleep in a beach chair, and he's like, now this guy, he can conceive of his pain. So he touches the guy's forehead, and he's like, yes, let me know your fear. Give me, feed me. And so he gets fed by this guy's fear. And we see a few hours later, he's in Hawaii, I guess. And he makes his way to a hospital, and he's like, this place has a lot of fear and pain inside of it. I will go feed there. And as he makes his way up, a security guard stops him and says, like, wait a minute, creep, what are you doing? He's like, go out there and kill a bunch of people with your gun. And so the security guard goes out and kills a bunch of people with his gun. And as Desaad makes his way deeper into the hospital, he's stopped by a doctor who says, now, wait a minute, we've got patients in here. You can't be in this place. And he's like, here's a scalpel. Cut yourself slowly and deeply. And so the doctor starts doing so. And then we cut to 1 year ago. And this is the point where I'm not entirely sure I know what's happening. So he's building a tower in the middle of the Congo. And it seems like he's just trying to cause fear and pain throughout the world. Like he's saying that he's giving more powerful IEDs in the Afghan war. And he's like, yes, quite good, thank you. And so he's trying to basically build up enough pain and such to get his energy back to do something in order to get a boom tube generator so that he can go back to Darkseid, go back to Apocalypse, because he is currently trapped on this planet. Something that happens throughout this issue is that we keep on cutting to a guy who looks incredibly like Jack Kirby being watched by Desaad, and Desaad's like, why is this man so goddamned great? I don't understand. So he looks inside one of the little portal bubbles he's got, sees the tunneling device, and he's like, that will let me get back to my planet. Go and fetch it for me. Go to Holt Industries and find it. So Desaad's men all go into Holt Industries. They shoot a bunch of men, and when they arrive, turns out that the tunneler is gone. And he's like, oh, Holt will know who stole it. And so that ties into a whole thing of what's going on in Earth 2. And then we go to Desaad again, who says, all right, everyone back. Wherever Holt's gone to, he's not my main concern. We got to figure out a different way to do this. So then we cut back to the Congo, still a year ago. That's like what it was before. And it looks like he's torturing this guy and getting like all these pain energies out of him. And we see 3 other people he's torturing, and he keeps on saying like, yes, these mortals, they're like clay. I can form them to become instruments of pain and torture and whatnot. And we see like one of these guys is a soldier shooting a fellow soldier. One of them's a nurse who causes just intense pain. One of them's a businessman, just being a businessman. And then he cuts back to Jack Kirby, and he's like, why is this guy such a pain in my dick? I don't get it. So we see him go down into his basement, and there's this guy who he's been torturing for a while who's been like super irradiated. I think it's the guy from the first arc of World's Finest, Ryota, I think. And he's torturing the guy, and the guy's like, make the pain stop. And he's like, why? Why do you want the pain to stop? Pain's freaking awesome. And he says, look, I'll make it stop as long as you want to be more, and you will serve me. So Ryota kneels down before him, claims, yes, you are my master. And he's like, God, you guys break too easily. I need you guys to like put up a fight. That's what the pain is for. And so then he looks again at Jack Kirby, and he's like, why are you so stubborn? You know what? I'm dealing with this. And so he opens up a boom tube, which if he's able to open up a boom tube, I don't understand why he can't just open up a boom tube. But regardless, he opens up a boom tube and he lands in Jack Kirby's studio. Jack Kirby apparently does not even notice. And mind you, when I say Jack Kirby, this isn't actually named Jack Kirby, but he's a comic book artist and he looks a lot like Jack Kirby. So Desaad like sneaks up behind him and he's like, yes, I will destroy this man. But then he's like, nah, never mind. You're not ripe enough. I'm going to come back when you're ripe for the pickings. So he goes back through a boom tube again. And he kneels before a statue of Darkseid, and he says, like, oh, come for me, master. I hope you don't think that I betrayed you. I am your servant in this overgrown world. Please bring me back home to you. And to be resolved, I guess, in Earth 2, despite the fact this is the world's finest villain. I don't know. It's somewhere in there. Why was it Jack Kirby? That's the part I'm not getting. Like, I understand it from, like, a meta perspective of, like, isn't Jack Kirby just freaking awesome? Isn't he so cool? Desaad was his creation. Let's pay a little homage to him. I get that. I understand that. But from a story perspective, I don't understand why Desaad was so interested in him. It didn't make any sense in the plot of the story. Like, for some reason, this guy is so pure of heart. Like, Desaad cannot corrupt him. Meanwhile, it doesn't even seem like he knew Desaad was there. So I don't know how hard he's even trying. I don't know. There's a lot to it. I think that the first, like, 6 pages of this are fine. And it's not that the second half is not great, but it's just the same thing over and over again without any change. It's him saying, I'm torturing a lot of people and I want to go home. And he just keeps doing that. Art-wise, I think it's good. I think it's got a good style to it. Some pages are hard to follow, but I think that's more on the writing than the art. I would say this is probably a good... It's at least a 7. It's a 6.5. I gotta say, like, the Jack Kirby stuff really throws me for a loop. And I feel like maybe I'm just not getting it, and that's why I'm wanting to give it the 7, because I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. But I read this twice now. I don't get it. I don't think there is anything here besides, hey, let's just pay homage to the king. So, yeah, 6.5. The Flash 23.1, aka Grodd, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Chris Batista. So this issue, the only thing you need to know going into it is that Grodd is not around, but the guerrillas, post their attack on Central City, did stick around, and they've been living in quote-unquote peace with the humans. So we see them just, digging trees, setting up statues, doing things with people, and all the people are like, oh man, these gorillas are great, they're so nice and cool. And he's talking with like the mayors of the towns and like some secretaries of the United Nations, and it's like, hey, are we cool with Gorilla City getting into the United Nations? And like, yeah, gorillas, you're super awesome, we're gonna let you in tomorrow, no big deal. So we see the gorillas are all gathered around the statue unveiling in Central City, and the mayor reads it off just being like, ah yes, our proud citizens and these new gorillas visiting us and whatnot, we're all happy to be here together, but let's not forget the men who brought us together. And they unveiled the statue, and it's of the Flash, and they're like, yes, Flash, I guess he's not here today, wonder where he is, I sure hope he isn't dead. And then at that point we see from Forever Evil, the Ultraman is putting the sun into a constant eclipse, and he's like, wait, hold on, what? Everything's going dark, what happens? And speeding across the plains, we see, coming into town is Grodd, and he busts in, he's like, all right, that's enough. And all the girls are like, oh god, it's Grodd, oh geez, what are we gonna do? And he flips the statue of Flash, and he's like, Flash is dead, he was weak, you all suck, stop worshiping him, worship me instead. And everyone's like, Grodd, hey buddy, we thought you were trapped in the Speed Force, what's going on? And he's just like, yeah, the crime syndicate let me out. And me personally, I'm rolling my eyes at that, like, I don't think that's how that works. But regardless, it's how the story's doing it right now. So at this point, he's like, wait a minute, hold on, like, what do you mean you were trapped in this, or what? Grodd says he has new powers, and he's like, what do you mean new powers? And turns out that, like the elders of their group, he now has evolved in the Speed Force to be able to use telepathy. But not just telepathy, he also has telekinesis. And he sees a news chopper overhead, and he starts to, like, bring it down. And everyone in the crowd, Gorilla and Human, are like, Grodd, stop it, man, we're going to have to take you out. And we see Pied Piper jumps in and tries to fight Grodd, and Grodd just backhands him away. And right behind him, we see Chroma, Tar Pit, and Girder, who all come up to Grodd, and they're like, hey, Grodd, we were at the meeting with the crime syndicate. We were hoping that, like, we could all run this city together. That sound cool? Like, we'll all just divvy it up. And Grodd's like, you want to rule it with me? Okay. Counteroffer, and he just starts beating the ever-living crap out of Girder and just tearing him apart. And Tar Pit and Chroma are like, all right, you made your point, goodbye. So at this point, everyone else in this crowd has started dispersing as well. We see everyone's running away, and Grodd starts giving out his, like, monologue. He's like, gorillas, you've been poisoned with lies. We are not weak. We are not meant to live with the humans. We are meant to rule over them. Oh, we can make no peace. And there's like, dude, we were literally making peace. We were like 6 minutes away from just being totally peaceful. Why are you being such a dick about this? And he's just like, oh, I will take you all on or whatever. And then we see Solovar stop him, and he basically tries to telepathy into Grodd's mind. And Grodd uses his telekinesis to take the lightning bolt off of Flash statue and throw it into Solovar's chest, seemingly killing him. But I don't think he's dead. So at that point, Grodd uses his telekinesis to finally bring down the UN chopper that's overhead. It explodes, killing a bunch of UN members, and the gorillas are like, okay, yeah, they're not going to let us live this one down. We got to fight against Grodd. Let's go. So they start charging him. All the humans are also like, okay, everyone shoot at the really bad monkey, none of the other ones. So everyone starts trying to attack Grodd. He starts fighting them all off and is like really good at it. He's using his Speed Force powers, obviously. And Solovar points in like, Grodd, are you willing to kill every man and ape just to make your point? And he's like, yeah, I'm kind of that pissed off. So at that point, Grodd stands on top of a pile of the bodies he already has. And he's like, all right, telepathy. Everybody listen up. Kneel before me. We are taking over. I am ruling this city at the very least, and then I will end up ruling the world and whatnot with my army of apes. So kneel before Grodd, and everyone kneels before him. And very quickly, it seems like within the course of a day, the gorillas turn on the humans and they start putting them into like camps and stuff like that, and they essentially rule over all of them. And we see that the other criminals who were planning on taking over the city, aka Chroma, he's dead. His head is just off his body. He's gone. And like the Flash statue is taken down. Solovar is chained to it. And one of the other apes, one of the elders, comes up and is like, hey, Grodd, you said that apes should be in charge, but you're kind of chained up Solovar. And a lot of people think that he's cool. So it's kind of not doing well with your numbers. And Grodd's like, oh, is that so? Okay, well, you know what? I have a solution for that. And he cuts off the ape that told him that's head and puts it on a pike along with like the mayor's head and such like that. And he basically says like, yeah, no, like we can't live together. We are far too different. We must remain separate and one of us will rule over the other. And as he stands before his gorilla army, he's like, Flash isn't coming. I've done it. I've ruled over the city. None can take me over. I have control of the Speed Force. I am everything I wanted to be. And he sits down on his throne and he says, I'm bored. And then he just leaps off his throne and flies away. And all the gorillas are left like, I'm sorry, what was that? What just happened? And it says here, to be continued in Forever Evil Rogues Rebellion, which I know is one of the little side series that's going on soon enough. So yeah, that's a book. I actually really like this because obviously we went through Grodd's origin already. We already went through that in The Flash. So this is just a nice little thing of, hey, Grodd's back and he is stronger than ever. No one is able to take him down. And so what happens? What happens when the Flash doesn't show up to save the day? And Grodd wins. Of course, I mean, it makes sense. It lays it all out in a reasonable fashion as to how he manages to win. But I think the best part of it is the end, where once he gets everything he wants, he realizes, no, it's never going to be enough. Like, yeah, he rules this city. So what? I want more. And he just leaps off. So I'm curious to see how that's going to flow into the Rogues Rebellion stuff, but I like the direction it takes at the very least. So I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a solid 8. I really did enjoy reading it. I think it was a good time overall. So it's also nice that Brian Buccellato, who's obviously writing the main series, is going to be writing all of the Flash tie-ins. So kudos on that. It's really going to feel like it flows well. At least hopefully it will. So yeah, 8 for this. Looking forward to the rest. Green Arrow 23.1, aka Count Vertigo, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So obviously in the Green Arrow book prior to this point, we already had a fight against Count Vertigo. He lost and he was kind of just left to his own devices as Green Arrow escaped. This issue, I guess, kind of picks up right after that. And we have Count Vertigo arriving on a plane. Someone's like, Mr. Zeitel, good to see you, because his name is Werner, possibly Werner Zeitel. And he's like, excuse me, did you just call me Mr.? It is Count, and you will address me as such. And he's like, right, yes, sorry, Count Zeitel. We are happy to see you, and we're so glad to have you here. And so he basically asks, where's my gear? And he makes his way over, and we see him getting his new upgraded Count Vertigo tech, like this thing that he embeds in his forehead and attaches to his soul to make everyone have these vertigo attacks. And it's established that the Count Zeitel is here in order to be it a fundraising donation thing for the Zeitel Foundation, but the reason the Count is here is for a totally different, separate reason. So they fly in on a helicopter to this abandoned building out in the middle of a field. We see it is called the Creus Mental Health Research Hospital, and Vertigo's like, I'm going in alone, stay out here, don't come in. And so he walks his way in, and as he looks around the place, he starts getting flashbacks. And the first flashback is to a time where he was very young. His mother is living in a very rundown apartment and pointing like, oh, can you point to our old country on a map? And it's like, yes, there it is. There's Vlatava. And the mom's like, yes, the rebels, they killed your father. I wasn't allowed to die with them in a heroic display because I had to go and save you, you weak, pathetic little child. And Werner's like, I'm sorry, Mama. I was a kid. And she's just like, yeah, well, he died protecting your birthright, and now we live here in this rundown shack. Thanks a lot, kid. And he's like, Mama, I'm sorry. And he's like, whatever, don't worry about it. I gotta go. I'm gonna be out late. I'll buy food in the morning, okay? Lock the door. So he also has this little teddy bear that he is super invested in and that he's carrying around everywhere. And so we see that he makes his way deeper in, and he has another flashback to his mom basically saying, hey, these men are from a hospital. They're going to take care of you. They're going to get you better. And he's like, but I'm not sick, Mom. I was like, no, you're not sick, but you're special, you're smart, and they're going to make you even better. So go with these men, and they're going to give us a lot of money, so we don't have to worry about that. Basically selling her son off to this mental hospital where they, of course, are experimenting on him. So we see him going through these experiments, and then he is getting older, growing up here, and he's in a room with a bunch of other teenage kids who are just mercilessly teasing him, prodding him, pointing out how his mother is a whore, and saying how, he's essentially just completely worthless. Also, I'm not sure if it's going to come up later, but they change, in order to hide him, I guess, or change his name to something more Americanized, they changed his name from Werner to Warren. I'm not sure why, because then they just immediately go back to calling him Werner. So the kids start playing with him. They steal his bear, and he gets so pissed off that he uses his Vertigo implant tech that they have on him to basically kill all of the kids in the room. And so he gets in there. He finds his bear sitting on the ground. We see another flashback 7 years later of him talking to the doctor, and the doctor's like, so yeah, how's it going? You feeling good? And he's like, yeah, no, I'm feeling great. Also, I decided I'm going to leave. And the doctor's like, okay, well, you don't really get to decide that. That's kind of something we decide. And he's just like, why? I'm the one with the power. You can't do anything to stop me. And he starts using his tech to attack the doctor. The doctor reaches under his desk and presses a safety switch. But it turns out that Vertigo has already disabled it. And he's like, yeah, no, I snuck in the middle of the night. I'm leaving now. Goodbye. And so he makes this guy bleed out of his head. And the guy's like, why? Why are you doing this to us? We made you better. We made you smarter. And he's like, you made me a weapon. So at this point, he kills the guy and says, no one's going to use the weapon but me. So again, some time passes. We see it's 1 year later, and he's just a boy. He makes his way up towards his old ancestral castle. There's a bunch of rebels that are guarding it, and they tell him, get lost, kid. You don't belong here. And he's like, actually, that's my castle, and I am going to be going inside of it. This is my country. And so he uses a Vertigo tech to take out all the rebels, and he makes his way into the castle. So finally, we're stuck in modern day here. He makes his way deep enough into the hospital that he comes across this man. I'm not sure that the man was Edvin, and he's just like, oh yeah, no, we found her. She was in a brothel out in Colombia, but we got her and we brought her here. And he walks Vertigo into the room, and sitting inside the room is his mother. And he's just like, oh, who are you? What are you doing? And he's just like, it's me. It's Werner. I'm here for you. And she's like, oh my God, Werner, they've been keeping me here. They've been keeping me all trapped, whatnot. And he's like, oh, Mom, you don't understand. I've been keeping you here. I've been punishing you. She's like, why? What did I do? And he's like, you sold me. I know that you sold me for money, that you were a whore using drugs and whatnot. This is not how a countess is supposed to act. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. You have to understand, we had nothing. We had nothing at all. And I had to do this. It was the only way that they said they would take care of you. And he's just like, okay, you know what? Forgive and forget. You're my mother. I understand. And she's just like, oh, thank you so much, son. It really means so much to me. Now we can both go home. We can both reclaim our country as we're supposed to. And he's like, oh, no. I forgive and forget, but you're not coming with me. In fact, you're not going to like where you're going. And he uses his powers and kills his mother at that point. And we see him exiting the place. He talks to Edvin saying, burn it to the ground. I don't ever want to think about this place again. Make it like it never existed. And as he makes his way back out to the helicopter, we see the building is burning. And he has left his now blood-stained bear inside to burn along with it. And he says, yep, all right, now to Seattle. I'm here to take on Green Arrow. So, damn, man, this is how you do a tie-in. This is how you do a little like event thing like this. Because not only is it tying into the main story of what's going on in Green Arrow, but it's just so good. Like, the art is great. How it manages to build up this villain as like far more deadly and heartless than he ever was in the original book. Like, beautiful. Fantastic. This is a fantastic issue. For a villain that I think is kind of silly, this book does wonders with them. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is probably, I mean, I can't say it's less than a 9. Like, this is, if you need to point to someone like, hey, yes, it's the new 52 version, but like, what makes Count Vertigo a decent villain? Boom. This is a great backstory, a great origin story. Love it. So I'm going to give it the 9, straight up. I'm really enjoying it. Justice League 23.1, aka Darkseid, written by Greg Pak, art by Paulo Siqueira. So this is the origin of Darkseid, more or less, but also tying into what's going on in Batman/Superman. So we open up once upon a time with a mud grubber, aka a farmer, named Uxas, along with Isaiah, his brother, and Avia, his sister. And turns out they live in a world where there are these gods, these titanic structural beings of like elements and stuff like that just fight and bicker and mess with each other all the time, and therefore they are destroying the world beneath them without even noticing. And so that's happening one of these times. We see Isaiah and Avia are praying to the gods, praying for mercy for them, and Uxas is like, you idiots, they don't care about you. Stop your praying. They don't give a damn about us. And so the gods just start trumping over the world. They laugh, they dance, they do whatever. And Uxas is just like, God, these I hate these gods so much. And Avia is like, oh, we were spared because of our prayers. And he's like, no, if they heard you, they would have killed you out of spite. They hate us. They despise us. And so Isaiah just backhands his brother after the brother says, now be nice, play nice with your sister. And Uxas is like, no, these gods, someone needs to do something about them. So he sees the mountain that they live on, and he decides enough is enough, and he climbs up into their quarters as they're asleep. And mind you, he is tiny compared to them. So he walks up and he starts whispering in their ears. He starts filling their dreams with doubt and discord. And we see that it basically causes the old gods to go to war. And it looks like Avia is fairly hurt in the conflict as Isaiah is holding what appears to be her body, but she turns out to be fine later. So we see Uxas comes up to the god that is down, and he's like, the god's like, hey, how about you pray for me? Give me a prayer. And he's like, oh, what's that? You feed off my faith? Well, I don't have faith in you, so die already. And he goes ahead and kills this downed god. And he's like, yeah, well, the narrator says no one kills a god and gets away with it unless you kill them all. So he goes through and he kills every single one of the gods and takes their power. He drains them of their might, and he transforms from Uxas into Darkseid. So at that point, we see, the world is falling apart. All of these gods are dead. There's only one god left, the Lord of the Sky. Isaiah comes up and pleads for the Lord of the Sky to save his sister. And he's like, yeah, no, I don't have enough power to do that, but I am going to put all of my remaining power into you because you seem to be of good heart and noble and whatnot. So he passes along that. Actually, you know what? I think he might be the brother-in-law of Darkseid because he says wife as he dies. So, yeah, never mind. They're brother-in-laws. So he gains the power of the Sky God and, of course, becomes High Father. He doesn't say that his name, but, he says that. And he starts fighting against Darkseid. I'm basically saying, dude, between us, with our powers combined, we could save everything. We could build it back as it was before. And Darkseid's like, no. And he just destroys the planet they're on, with those two being the only two left. So at this point, he goes out, he finds Apocalypse, he makes his own people and, tortures them. He makes it a hell. He rules it with an iron fist. And we meet this new character named Kaio, who is a chaos bringer, just a little trickster person on this planet that likes messing with the parademons and whatnot. And as they cause this sort of chaos and infighting amongst the amongst the parademons, Kaio laughs, and Darkseid is like, that's not allowed. So he just immediately Omega Beams Kaio. But apparently Kaio is able to teleport, which even Darkseid is not quite sure how to deal with. So he finds one of the teleportation portals and holes that's opened and looks inside of it. And inside he sees Superman and all the other heroes of the planet. And he's like, wait a minute. There are other places to conquer? This changes everything. So he goes in, and of course we have this is a Superman. It's not the Superman, it's a Superman. And he's like, all right, this is something. And he's saying, where did you get so much power? Why is Superman able to stand against me? And he doesn't have a good answer for it, but he does see that Ixaya is making his own planet of New Genesis. So at this point, Kaio shows up and taunts Darkseid some more, and Darkseid's like, okay, I'm going to track you down. I'm going to chase you no matter where you go. So Kaio sends him to all these different planets, and he's able to see all these different versions of these heroes, all these different Supermen and whatnot, until finally he takes him to Earth Zero, where he comes up against the Justice League, as we saw all the way at the beginning of the New 52, and he's able to be fought off. These people are able to fight off Darkseid. And Darkseid, he's like, okay, Kaio, I know you're around, I know you're listening, even if I'm not sure where you are. You're a lot like I was. You're poking the bear, you're fighting against the gods because you don't like the way they do things. And I get it, I understand it, but just know this, I'm not going to let up. And we see he enters into a room laughing with seemingly a whole bunch of dead Supermen inside, like all of the Supermen that he's killed. And it says at the bottom, where will Darkseid strike next? Read Batman vs Superman and Earth 2. So showing up there as well. I gotta say, I don't particularly like the Kaio half of things. I think that there could have been a better reason as to why Darkseid was, looking through, trying to find other worlds to conquer. I don't like the idea that it's just a little trickster spirit was like, he, look at me. That being said, I do actually enjoy the backstory of him going out and killing all the old gods and draining them of their power, because it just makes him a little bit more menacing that even when he didn't have power, he was able to kill gods. So what does he do with that power? He becomes just this ultimate evil. I like that. I think it does a lot for his character. It's a good enough book. I just think that the back half is kind of lacking, and I don't particularly feel like it sets up that much of, what's going to happen next, Unless we really dive into the fact of all these alternate Earth Superman are dead, which that's pretty heavy. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 6.5. Would be a 6 if it weren't for the fact that I did like the intro just that little bit extra enough to get it that extra amount. But yeah, it's not great. It's probably not the strongest opening to what should be the biggest bad of Villains Month, but hey, it's where we're at. Justice League of America number 7.1, aka Deadshot, written by Matt Kint, art by Sammy Bassery and Carmen Carnero. So this is basically just the origin story of Deadshot. We see him looking at his phone to start with. It goes from $0 in his balance to $2 million. And he's like, all right, time to start the job. And his inner narration is basically like, why do I do what I do? You really want to know? My story is not for the faint of heart. And he basically says, like, for a long time I was haunted by my origin story, but now I realized, like, if there is a purpose to all this, who cares? So he jumps out of a plane with this massive ass gun on his back, and we then flash back to the Narrows in Gotham. And we see his parents. It's this horrible rundown place. His dad was unemployed but finally got a job. And he's like, oh, no, I got this new job. It's at Ace Chemical. They're going to make me security. Everything's going to be fine, honey. I'll be able to get us out of this place. Things are finally looking up for the Lawton family. And we see through the keyhole, watching them argue, is Floyd's sister. And he's like, oh, Floyd, what's going on with mom and dad? What's going on? And Floyd's just laying in bed reading a book of Western revenge stories and whatnot, of like a sharpshooter and whatnot. And he's not caring. He's just off in his own little world. He's just trying to distract himself from the misery they live in. And we see in this beautiful little sequence here, sharing a wall with them is a couple of people who, I guess, are robbing someone, or they've stolen some money from somebody. And then on the other side of their wall in the stairwell are two guys with guns that are about to bust in. And they bust in and just start unloading fire on these guys that stole from them. And bullets go flying everywhere, including through the wall into the Lawton apartment. And they end up killing Floyd's mom, dad, and sister. And he narrates like, why was I spared? I was laying on the bed. They like 12 bullets managed to kill every member of my family. Why was I the one that was spared? And he couldn't figure out a good reason for it. So he got a look at the faces of the guys who killed the people who stole money from them. And he made the deal of, okay, I got in my dad's closet. I took his gun. I'm going to get really, really good at this. And I'm going to make sure that I never miss, because a stray bullet can cause many, many problems. And he justified it under the idea of, it costs more. It's that extra bit of money. Those tiny little bullets add up. But in reality, it's because his parents and family was killed by stray bullets. So he trains over the years. He gets really good at it until finally he sees the two guys that were the ones who pulled the triggers, that fired the guns, and he sees them walking out of a store, and he manages to kill both of them with a single bullet. And so he goes to the boss, the guy who actually ordered them to be there that night, and the boss is like, those were some of my best men. I should kill you for killing them, but you did it so impressively, I'm going to hire you. You're going to be my hitman. And so he pays Floyd, and he starts being the hitman for him. And Floyd's like, yeah, no, I believe every bullet is special, and he shows how he hand makes each bullet. He puts like special microchips and stuff like that. Like, he makes it so that every bullet he fires is super important. And so that's why he's doing this. He's getting this money, doing these things in order to basically live through them. Like, he's making it so that the money he has is the sort of money that they always wanted. So he's making that, and we see the job he's currently on is he's falling out of a plane. There's a guy running around in like a super suit of armor that's completely impenetrable. And so he comes down with his massive high power rifle, and he's like, I'm going to take this guy out. And he shoots the guy through the weak point on his suit, but it's still not enough to penetrate the whole way through. It just makes a hole that goes down to the bottom layer. And he says, and that's why I'm going to shoot one more time. And he shoots a second shot into the hole far enough in that it hits the exact point where he hit before, and it penetrates through and explodes the armor. So at this point, the guy explodes, the suit goes off, and we see that there was a young kid that was there that he was reaching out for in the last moment. Seems like it's his son. And Deadshot's like, well, if there's one thing I've learned, you do not leave people like me afterwards. You make sure you take care of all the people who are going to revenge the bloodline and whatnot. So he shoots the kid in the head and takes him out as well. So he lands, he gets a call from Waller, who is clearly not doing well because Belle Reeve was absolutely decimated in Forever Evil. And she's like, Floyd, I want to hire you. I know that my Suicide Squad stuff doesn't mean anything to you anymore, what with the whole world being all topsy-turvy. I want to hire you. I will pay you as much as it takes. Uncle Sam's willing to spend a lot right now, but I need you to help keep this under control. And Floyd's like, let me see the money first. And he checks his bank account, and it goes from 2 million to 12 million. And he's like, all right, looks like I'm fighting for the side of Waller. So it says to be continued in a Suicide Squad tie-in, number 24. But yeah, it's I like it. I think it's actually a very creative backstory for him. I mean, the whole thing, once he starts his training and whatnot, like, who cares? It doesn't mean a lot to me. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is he actually went and killed the original mob guy, like the one who ordered the hit that ended up killing his family. Yeah, he killed him as well. So, I mean, I get it. I understand that he's very much in the level of, like, anti-villain, where he's a bad guy, but he's supposed to be a protagonist. He's supposed to be an understandable villain. So, I mean, I get it, but I think that by the time he gets to the point where he's just killing for money, I don't, like, it just seems a bit too normal. It seems a bit too, like, yeah, I mean, he's a hitman. That's what he is. I really like the idea of him, though, only shooting what he has to because his family was killed by stray bullets. That's just really creative to me. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. Overall, art is good. Everything else in this issue was fine. I don't really have a problem with the way it was presented. It's just an issue of, I think they could have done a more creative backstory in the second half. I think that having him just be a normal hitman and was really, really good at it seems kind of blasé to me. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I actually really liked it. I think it was a solid backstory. It's, again, just that second half. So, yeah. Justice League Dark number 23.1, aka The Creeper, written by Ann Nocenti and Dan DiDio, art by Chris Cross, Fabrizio Fiorentino, and Tom Derenick. So just a little bit of backstory. The Creeper is currently a primary villain in the Katana series going on. I'm not a fan. Also written by Ann Nocenti, so yeah. So we pick up in rural Japan in the 16th century, where a tornado went through and killed a whole bunch of families. And we see that a young, like, teenage boy is the only one who's left. And because they didn't do some ceremony to ward off evil spirits, the evil spirit that will come to be known as the Creeper, now just an Oni, gets into his soul. So he's in a guy named Jakku. Then we cut to a samurai who has vowed to hunt down Jakku because he knows that there's an evil spirit in him. And it turns out Jakku is going around and being a tornado chaser. And so he literally goes on horseback into the eye of tornadoes. Mind you, I don't know how many tornadoes there are in ancient Japan, but I don't feel like there should be this many. So regardless, Samurai comes up, he ends up slicing Jakku, and he has the Soul Taker sword, which is what Katana uses. And he absorbs the Oni's soul into it, and he says, now you're stuck in there forever. So the years go on, this samurai, he continues his noble mission or whatever, but over time he becomes more and more cruel. He becomes more and more angry. He ends up being a rogue samurai at a certain point, and he's like, I'm thinking this might be because of my sword. It's exuding bad juju on me. And he ends up fighting against some other samurai guy who impales him with his own sword, therefore absorbing his soul inside of it as well. And when he gets in there, it's insanity. It's like a whole bunch of things that shouldn't fit in this time period, but regardless, inside of it, the Oni, who now goes by the name of the Creeper and looks like his normal self, he's like, hey, you locked me in here however long ago. I'm going to torture you because I'm basically the devil of this Soul Taker realm. So we see that inside of which there's a little girl named Mona Shard, who he's been forced to bang her head against a wall over and over again. There is I'm quoting here, a cuckolded husband Maseo, who is Katana's husband, that is forced to roll a rock up a hill just to have it roll down over and over again. And I'm like, are we still in rural Japan? Does this not follow the linear passage of time? I'm so very confused. But regardless, eventually, as the years pass or whatever, the dimension cracks. And this is because in the real world, Killer Croc broke the Soul Taker's sword. And so all the spirits escaped, and the samurai's like, I just kind of let Creeper go. I'm not that worried about chasing him down just yet. We've got eternity. So he just lets him go. We see Creeper goes and he has to bond himself to a body. So he goes to the body of a reporter that died recently named Jack Ryder. And he's using his corpse to basically go around town and whatnot. And he makes his way to an apartment complex and he sees a whole bunch of happy families and he's like, oh, I hate happiness. So he goes down to the janitor and forces the janitor to essentially set fire to the entire complex so that all the families inside die. And the guy says his name is Gallagher and he didn't want to do it, but he was forced to by the Oni. So at that point, the sun comes up and it means that the Oni has to go away, has to retreat back into Jack Ryder's body. So we see Jack, it's been weeks later. He's on TV. A bunch of people in a diner are watching him, pointing out, like, dude, that guy died. Like, I watched him die on TV. He was killed by a giant monster. And now he's up here doing all these, like, horrific stories and whatnot. And he's, like, TMZing it. He's an awful guy, but he's so damn entertaining. So he manages to interview the Gallagher janitor, and he's like, Mr. Gallagher, why'd you do what you did? And he's like, you told me to do it. And he's like, Gallagher's clearly a total psychopath because I never would have done that. Anyway, this is Jack Ryder signing off. So he signs off, but the cameraman keeps rolling and it's just like, Jack, your viewers want to know, are you in cahoots with the people who caused these crimes? How do you get here so fast? And Jack's like, why, yada. So he makes his way down to a bar, and his manager, his producer, whatever it is, basically says, like, dude, you're not okay. You have been drinking substantially more. You look like death, like you're not getting any sleep at night. You gotta, like, tone it back a little. And he's like, I'm Jack Ryder. I'll drink when I'm dead. Again. So at that point, he tries going to bed. Creeper wakes him up and takes him out to a pool hall where he goes and starts hitting on this woman. The woman's like, yeah, my boyfriend's over here. And the boyfriend's like, we got a problem. And he's just like, yeah, I'm going to take your girls. How about you butt out? And the guy's like, hey, buddy, this is a family place. Let's not get crazy. And he's like, all right, well, how about this? We'll play a game of pool for her. If I clear the table, I get to take her. And he just smashes the balls extremely hard to the point where they go flying everywhere. And he just grabs the woman and runs out of the bar. And we see at this point he transforms from looking like Jack Ryder into looking like the Creeper. And he starts fighting off all these bikers that are standing outside. He uses his chain that he carries with him to make a tornado that, like, grabs them all up. And everyone's like, oh, dear Lord, what in the hell's going on? It's a monster. You got to send out the National Guard to stop this guy. And a bunch of cops show up, and the Creeper's like, oh, I hate law and order, ha 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 ha, and he causes all this chaos, and just basically massacres a whole bunch of people. And the sun starts coming up, obviously the Creeper retreats, Jack Ryder comes to his senses, he's like, why am I here? Why are so many people dead? Oh well, cameraman, get over here. This is Jack Ryder, and I'm here for ratings. And that's it. That's the issue. I think this did a decent job of explaining across, like, the first 5 pages what the Creeper is and where he came from. But the moment he got out and took over the body of Jack Ryder, I immediately stopped caring. Because, like, he's a chaotic demon. We get that. That's fine. Why did we have to spend all this time showing, like, ha 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 ha, I'm able to make tornadoes, or ha 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 ha, I'm able to do trickstery things? Like, we get it. Tell me more about who the Creeper is, or better yet, who Jack Ryder is. I feel like I'm not getting a good picture of either of them throughout this issue. And on top of it, I'm just really not a fan of the art style. I'm really not a fan of the 2 writers on the story. It's just not great. The only good art is on, like, page 1, where there's this ethereal image of the Creeper inside this kid's eye, and he's just, like, looks like storm clouds. And I thought, like, oh, wow, if we keep getting this art for him, it's going to look great. No, it's just that page. So, yeah, I can't, in good conscience, give this a good rating. I won't say that it's the worst thing I've read involving the Creeper. Most of Katana has been worse than this, but it's just so non-necessary. I don't understand why they thought giving the Creeper more backstory was going to sell, period, let alone be interesting. So I'm going to give this a 4.5. I'm just not happy with it. I'm just generally not happy with it. And the only thing getting it that high is this first page, because it's just that impressive. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics to September 4th, 2013. And I am just now realizing that today, at least the day that this episode goes out, is Labor Day, which means I have off of work, which means I would have had extra time to make this episode, because I am staying up really late, and now I'm realizing that I would have had extra time, so I have pushed myself for actually no reason. That's disappointing for me, but lo and behold, the episode's done, so what do you care? Anyway, next week we continue Villains Month with a whole new slew of characters. Some of them great, some of them awful, some of them more awful than you'd think. So let's go ahead down the list here and just let you know what's coming out. So we have next week, I'm not again going to list off the name of the book themselves, I'm just going to tell you the villains. We have Riddler, Court of Owls, Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn, Zod, Brainiac, Mongol, Black Manta, Solomon Grundy, Reverse Flash, Lobo, Killer Frost, and Trigon. Out of all those, I don't know which ones are going to be good, but I do know Lobo, that's something you're going to want to tune in for. Lobo is just that disappointing. And for anybody who knows New 52 Lobo, oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but we will get to that next week. In the meantime, if you have any thoughts on anything that I've said throughout this episode, last episode, any episode at all, go ahead and hit me up pretty much anywhere in the description. We have a Reddit, a Patreon, a Discord, all of which is freely accessible, except for the Patreon, obviously. That comes with a bouncer, so go ahead and hit up any of those. Looking forward to seeing what you have to say. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for tuning into year 3 of our show. I mean, obviously, it's just starting. I'm not saying, like, yeah, thanks for being around for the entirety of year 3. Thanks for showing up. I divert too much onto little tangents here when I film these things late at night, and I realize I'm now on one, so I'm just going to shut up. Thank you. Tune in next week. However it is you consume this podcast. Thank you for listening, watching, whatever. Be sure to tune in. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.